I was brutally honest, and the world got to see that. Even the interns looked at me funny. I was supposed to be their boss, and it turned out I was an embarrassing, sniveling dick. "And so ends our journey," Howard said when it was all over. "You guys didn't pay enough. Our audience is stunned and can't really speak." "Did it live up to the hype?" I asked. "Better than a Barbara Walters special," said one of the audience members. What killed me was at the time I couldn't convince Nancy to come on the show and tell everyone how she felt when she actually got the tape. The truth was, she didn't think I was a stalker, and she didn't call 911 after watching it. In fact, when I decided to do this book, I reached out to her again. We've kept in touch over the years, and this time she was ready to share what she was thinking. Finally, here's what Nancy has to say about the tape, 22 years later. "People I know who listen to the show say to me, 'Did you listen today?' They mention it again. It's like infamy. But no one had done that for me before. I was living at home on Long Island, and I watched it by myself, although I did tell my best girlfriend about it, and I told the guy I was dating, too. To be honest, I thought the tape was a romantic gesture. If you asked any woman what she thought of something like that, she would be like, 'Wow, I wish a guy would sit down and do that for me.' We were in our 20s, and at that point, I had just gotten out of college, and we had a pretty tight relationship. After I watched it, I was crushed and cried. I showed it to my friend, and she was like, 'So what are you going to do?' But there was nothing to do. That's one reason why it was hard to see it, because everything that was said about being together came too late, after I had decided to break up and move on. We had a close relationship, but I did lose my best friend. I remember not wanting to get together after we broke up because I knew you were not going to let me off the hook. You were going to take what it took to get me back, and there was no doubting what you wanted. You were saying, 'I realized I was a jerk and wanted to do the right thing.' But it was also upsetting listening to it on the show all those years later, because it was like someone ripped a page out of my diary from 10 years earlier and then played it over and over. I don't know which emotion came first, being embarrassed, angry, mortified, or extremely apologetic. That tape is buried in a box with letters that go with it. I just watched it for the first time in 22 years, and I am sorry for ever sharing its existence. I will say this, though. I didn't even notice you were wearing the Atlantic Records t-shirt. It didn't make a single lasting impression on me. To be honest, if you asked me whether or not it was worth it, my first answer used to be yes. It helped me pay for my kitchen. But now I'd immediately change my answer to no. I just didn't know there would ever be such a thing as YouTube, and this tape would live in perpetuity. Even today, people still react to it. It's the brawniest guys who usually stop and whisper under their breath to tell me they did something just like that once. But it's the women's reaction that is most surprising. A lot of them are like the callers that day, telling me I'm a pussy and that I should have manned the fuck up. At the time, the $22,000 seemed like a lot of money. Now it's been played so much on the show and on YouTube, I feel it's down to a nickel a play.
Chapter 15. Fridays and Sally Fu.
After the dreadful day of executive assistant interviews, I had to regroup. I didn't have a job, and I wasn't going to the city to look for jobs because I couldn't type. I needed a plan. So I decided the plan was going to be, don't have a plan. Instead of moping on the couch, I went back to work at Record World. Summer was a great time to work there. The mall was always buzzing, and hot girls were always in the store looking for records. I liked the action. I put in 30 hours a week, listened to great new music every day, hung with Frank, Vinny, and the boys or friends from the store at night, got in some good beach time. I decided to give myself the rest of the summer to relax, and then come September, I was going to figure out my life. My parents weren't bothering me to get out of the house, and most of my friends hadn't lit it up in the job market yet, so I didn't feel too bad hanging around. Then right before the summer ended, the manager at Record World asked me if I had a job lined up for the fall. When I said my calendar was wide open, she offered me a full-time job there. Fantastic, I thought. I'd make money while I looked for a career. That first Monday in September, I showed up for work at 10 a.m. I'd never been there that early during the week. My shifts had always been nights and weekends. It was strangely quiet in the store and in the mall. Everyone I was used to seeing had gone back to school, and the people working at the store were actually people who didn't have any other options. They were adults, pushing 30, and this was how they paid the rent and bought food and filled their gas tanks. It dawned on me that my future was being shoved in my face like a shaving cream pie, and I didn't even see it coming. It's one thing to be hanging at the store on weekends and fighting with your friends about which records to play, but it's another to be there early in the morning during the week with no chicks looking for music and a feather duster in your hand to clean the tops of the cabinets. I freaked a little bit. I didn't want to be a Record World lifer. I had to find a job. First, I called Steve North, my old boss at WLIR. He had moved on and now was working at WNBC Radio in New York. He said he'd keep his eyes open for me. Then I reached out to fellow communications majors from Adelphi and kids I had done internships with. I quickly found out that a lot of these people didn't have the passion for working in radio that I did. They had spent a few months looking for those kind of jobs, had struck out, and started getting real work. They had given up or gone into retail or become travel agents or did pharmaceutical sales. This was discouraging. Once you do that, that's what you do. Forever. Here was the rub. I was working at the record store during the day, and that was the only time to interview for jobs that could lead to a real career. I was in a dead-end job that was keeping me from getting a new job. I had to quit the store. Believe it or not, the best option I could find for work was as a host at TGI Fridays. An ex-girlfriend hooked me up. It was the perfect scenario, in theory. I worked as a host from 5 in the afternoon until 11 at night. On Saturdays, it was packed with people bribing me to get them to the front of the line so they could sit down and order overstuffed potato skins as soon as possible. And then I had all day to hunt for my dream job. Except TGIF was like entering the abyss. It offered employees a free drink and half-off food after work. When I clocked out at 11, I went over to the bar and joined the rest of the people whose shifts had just ended to have our free beer. While we were sitting there, we thought, let's get some food, it's half off. Then we got more to drink, then more to eat. Pretty soon it was closing time and everyone would decide to head somewhere else. Then when that place closed, we went to someone's house to hang out. Suddenly I was getting home at 6 in the morning. Not only could I not get up for any interviews, I could barely get up in time for my 5 p.m. shift. Not that it mattered how available I was during the day, I couldn't even find jobs to interview for. In fact, between September and Christmas, I had one job interview. That was in October. Steve North called me and said the NBA needed someone with entry-level TV production experience. If I wanted to interview, he could get me in. I drove from Long Island to the NBA production office in Secaucus, New Jersey, and I was exactly what they needed, a sports-crazed kid who knew how to work professional TV equipment, log tapes, and cut promos. I killed it. The guy I interviewed with told me he was working on a piece about George Mikan, the NBA's original superstar back in the 1940s. I shook my head up and down like it was a great idea, but I had no clue who George Mikan was. I was a sports nut, still am, but I was a Mets, Jets, Islanders guy. The NBA wasn't ever my thing. Clearly I fooled him because he asked me to come back the next day to discuss it with some more people. That night I went to the library and looked through every book I could find about basketball, writing it all down on a fact sheet. Then I went home and studied. Overnight, I became a George Mikan expert to the point that at the interview the next morning, I was spewing stats that even he didn't know. You are perfect for the job, he told me. Now you have to go to the corporate